Good morning, everybody, and welcome to this next MitID migration webinar. My name is Dorte Lindahl Rasmussen, and I'm the Nordic Regional Marketing Manager at Signicat. Before we start, I would like to give you some information. If you do have any questions, please write them in the question box in the GoToWebinar panel, and we will be back at the end of the webinar. The webinar session is being recorded, and it will be possible to watch it after the session. And after the webinar, there will be a short survey that we would kindly ask you to fill in. Today's webinar will specify areas that you as a service provider should be aware of before the migration. And the webinar will be presented by my colleagues, Gregers Alsted, Senior Sales Executive, and John Galliano, Senior UX Designer, and Helge Lund Kolstad. Good morning, John and Gregers, Customer Success Manager and MitID Onboarding Manager. Good morning. And with that introduction, I would like to hand over to you, Gregers.
Thank you very much, Dorte. And good morning to everybody, and thank you for joining our MitID migration update webinar today, February 4th. In this 30 minutes webinar, we will give you information about update on the interaction design and graphical profiles. We'll talk about the MitID test tool, and finally we are open for question and answers. So to those of you who don't know Signicat, I will just give you a brief introduction, because at Signicat we are building a trusted digital world. So what does that mean? That actually means that we can help you with everything in the digital world, so as authentication services, digital signing, digital onboarding, scanning ID documents, and also lookup services. Two very important items in this year 2021 is MitID and MitID, and of course the migration from MitID to MitID. So how do we get there? Well, you can start booking a meeting with us, and the easiest way to do that is to use the link you see on top on this screen, or you can also call us, and we will be very happy to arrange a meeting with you, so we can tell you everything you need to do in order to be ready for the MitID migration and the go live in May this year. So why should you actually choose Signicat as your broker? Well, there are several good reasons. One of them is we have been around for 15 years. We are 250 specialists working for you. We have a lot of good references and customers. We have a bunch of important certifications, ISO certification, QSTP certifications, and others. And finally, we see ourselves as an international hub for eIDs, as we at Signicat, we support more than 30 eIDs throughout Europe. So the MitID go live is in May this year. So where are we? Well, in January, February, and March, right now, we are about to prepare and align the test and integrations for the go live. In March and April, we will set up the service provider in the pre-production environment and prepare for the live test. And in April and May, we will make things ready for the go live, which is in May the 6th. And then from May until December this year, both MitID and the old MitID will run in parallel. So our best recommendations to you is to get started. All right, that was very brief about Signicat and just a little bit about MitID. I would like to hand over the microphone to my colleague John Galliano. John will inform you about the interaction design and the graphical profiles. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Gregers. Yeah, so today I will show you three things. I will show you three examples that we have of the interaction design between MID and MitID, which you as a service provider can choose between in the transition phase. I will show you an updated design on the graphical profiles. And lastly, I will show you a demo where the MitID app is used as a web authenticator. So let's get to it. So here you see a typical service provider website. Some of you are probably familiar with it. It's our super bank. So here, if I as a customer want to log in, I am met with a pop-up where I can choose between login with MitID or login with NemID. This solution is designed and hosted by you as a service provider, so you have some flexibility in how you want it to look, and if you want to be more in line with your branding and so forth, you can do that. It's up to you. All you have to keep in mind is that you need to have a certain look of the MitID button. So they have some requirements there. Other than that, it's flexible. Then we have option 2, where you are redirected from when you click the login to a Signicat hosted ID portal, so to speak, where you also have the option between MitID and NemID. And you also can use our graphical profiles to style this to your liking. So this is pretty plain right now, but you can style it if you want to. So this is hosted by us. Then we have option number 3, where you again click on the login and you are redirected directly to one of the EID methods login flows. So here I'm redirected to the MitID flow. So I can just start logging in right away. But what if I didn't want to have MitID? Well, you could also redirect the customer directly to the NemID if you want to do that in the beginning. And if you, for some reason, the customer is, hey, I don't have NemID or I have MitID, you can click on this label where you will be redirected to the MitID login page. And for the MitID, you have the same where you can be redirected to the NemID login flow. So these are three options as you as a service provider get that we provide you that you can choose between in the transition phase between NemID and MitID. All right, let's go into broker landing page. So we have made some updates on the template for the graphical profile. So today it looks a little bit like this. So there are a few things that we still are determining, such as the drop shadow around the box. Maybe it will be a stroke, or maybe you have the option for both. We are still figuring out the technical things there, but this is more or less what we will provide now. And let's take a look at what you as a service provider can customize. So you can customize the logo, obviously. I don't think you want it to say Superbank. Then we have the subdomain up here, which you can change. Then we have the header, where you can change the color. Then we have the reference text in the MitID box, where you can change to your branding or name. Then we have the help text section, where you can change the text, obviously, and you can add links that make sense for you. And this whole thing is optional to show, meaning if you don't show anything here, this box will be mid-center and the box around it will be adjusted accordingly so it looks nice and smooth. Then, Then we have the label that we have already shown you. This is a temporary label which you can use to redirect the customers between the methods. This is also optional to show. And lastly, we have the background where you can change the color, or you can add a background image. So let's take a look at how it will look with a simple styling where you just added a background image. And it could look something like this. And the neat thing here is that it's also Web Content Accessibility Guide 2.1 compliant because we have the box around it, which we think is pretty neat. We do value your input. So if you can join us in a quick poll where we have two different solutions which we want you to vote on. So solution A, we use the links in the help text section where you could redirect your customer to the NemID login or to the MitID login through clicking on one of the links. Or solution B, where the label, which we have already looked at, functions as the redirect links. So if you had to choose, which solution would you prefer as a service provider? Dorte, if you can start the poll. Perfect, perfect. All right. Good stuff. Demo time. So now we'll show simple flow where the MitID app works as an authentication device for a web login. There we go. That's all from me. Thank you so much. Over to you, Gregers.
Thank you very much, John. Yes, our next item on the agenda is status on the MitID test tool. And here I would like to hand over the microphone to my colleague, Helge Lund Kolstad.
Thank you. All right, so in May we will all go live, of course, and but before that time you would obviously like to get started in pre-production, and this section is about how to do that. So could I have the next slide, please? All right. So a bit of good news here. We had an indication earlier, if any of you attended our last webinar, that MitID as a proper method wouldn't be available in pre-production before the actual go live date in May. The latest information we have is that this is no longer the case. We have an indication that MitID will be released in pre-production on the 6th of April, a month before. This applies both to the test user tool, which is used to generate test users. I'll show you a sneak peek of that later on, and also the pre-production method itself. Next item, please. If you need to test anything before that date, then please contact us. We have some measures we can put in place. It's not perfect, but we will do our best to accommodate you. All right, yes, this is a screenshot from the test tool, which we have access to in the development flow. Unfortunately, this is not something we are allowed to publish to all our service providers. But you can get an idea of what it looks like here. For those of you who are familiar with the MitID test tool, this looks a bit like it. And from this tool, you can both create new identities and also manage the test identities you already have. Okay. The available options here, you can revoke the identity. You can also suspend it if you would like to test both those flows. The password authenticator is not issued by default here. Sorry, it is issued by default here, but you can also issue a new one. TOTP authenticator is like a code token, but through a simulator in this test tool. The same goes for the app simulator. You can test with the actual app, but you can also test with a simulator here from this test tool. The same goes for the chip simulator, of course. Okay, next slide, please. Yeah,
All right.
that's pretty much all I had. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Helge. All right. I think we are open for question and answers now. I have a question here. Which authentication devices will be issued to end users and which has to be asked for specifically?
All right, I can answer that. There are 3 authentication devices that will be issued by default. You can choose between the app, the smartphone app, or a code token if you, for some reason, cannot use a smartphone app. Or if you have trouble seeing any of the codes displayed on the token or app, you can also have a code reader, which will read them out loud to you. There are 2 authentication devices that have to be asked for specifically, which is the password, which obviously will be free of charge, but you must ask for it specifically. And also the chip. This is a device which has a cost, but it is required for some flows.
Thank you very much, Helge. We have another question here. When creating test users, can we specify the CPR number?
Yes, you can. There is a form. I didn't have a screenshot of that, unfortunately. But there is a form that you get in when creating the test user where you can specify all the details, or you can use the pre-filled details if needed.
All right, thank you very much. And another one here. How can we use MitID for e-com checked out in an iframe?
Yes. Unfortunately, you cannot use MitID in an iframe. That is not allowed by the scheme. However, there are plans for you to be able to use a pop-up from the iframe with the MitID window. That obviously has its own drawbacks, but if you absolutely must use an iframe, that's an option we are looking at.
All right, thank you very much. And I have another question here. So the MitID test tool will not be available for service providers as well from April 6th. That was a question. So if they,
Yes.
yeah.
The latest information we have indicates that the test tool will be available in pre-production from April 6th.
Okay, thank you. And let me see, there is one more question here. Is it correct that we can sign in with username and password when we run Detectify scan in pre-prod? We need fixed values to log in. We cannot do that in MitID.
Could you repeat the question, please?
Yeah. Is it correct that we can sign in with username and password, question mark, when we run Detectify scan in pre-prod? We need fixed values to log in.
Oh yeah. Yes, you can have a flow in pre-production where you log in with username and password. However, this will result in eIDAS assurance level low.
Okay, that's fine.
Yeah.
I have another question here. will app be available for test users when your pre-prod goes live? And does it require GSM or is it internet only?
It is based on a smartphone app. To my knowledge, it will not require a GSM line, only an internet connection. But Lars, perhaps you can correct me on that.
Yeah, it is internet based, and for the test tool you can use a simulator which is in the test tool, so you don't have to register for the app itself. You can use the test tool to simulate the app flow.
Precisely.
Okay, I have another one here about security levels. When will level of security low be available?
Security level low, or assurance level low, I should say, will be available from the start, from May 6th. However, in order for a login with low to make sense, you would have to be issued a password, because you can do it with the app, but in that case, the flow would be no different from substantial, and so there would be no user benefits. So, and passwords are not issued automatically. The user has to ask for them specifically. Therefore, we predict that, at least to begin with, assurance level low will not be a common use case.
Thank you very much for that. We have another question here. Do you have reasons to believe that there will be any delays in the timeline from the issuer side?
We have had no indication that there will be any delays.
Okay, thank you very much.
There's not much more to say about that.
Another question here. If one of our customers is part of the pilot group, do we have to provide access to log in for them from May?
Well, all the material that we have, we and the other brokers have received from Digitaliseringsstyrelsen have indicated that all service providers who wish to provide MitID should absolutely be available from the go live date, or make MitID available from the go live date. Having said that, we cannot force anybody, but they should absolutely make MitID available from the go live date.
Thank you. Yeah, I think we still have time for a few more questions. One here is if a user chooses to migrate, will the MitID then still work after the migration?
Yes, the MitID user will work as long as the underlying user certificate is valid and not revoked or anything like that. If you have been migrated to MitID and your MitID user stops working for some reason, you won't be issued a new MitID identity. From that point, it's MitID only.
Yes.
But as long as the MitID user is still valid, you can use both if you like. However, some of the banks, and we have indications that other service providers will go for this approach too, will mandate MitID as long as they know you are migrated. So if you log in with MitID once, then you have to log in with MitID. You cannot use MitID anymore.
Yeah, that makes sense.
Yeah.
All right. Can the customer choose more than one MitID authenticator?
Yes, you can have any number of authenticators available. There is no limitation as that I'm aware of, at least.
All right. There's one here. The option to let Signicat handle the user's choice of either MitID or MitID, is that implemented in the advanced graphical profile?
It is, absolutely. And in fact, John showed you that earlier on, that you could click the link to choose either MitID or MitID, depending on what you had presented as the default. So that shouldn't be a problem.
All right. I have 2 questions left here. With MitID, the user needs to provide both username and password, even to do 2-factor authentication. So that is not the case for MitID? Question mark.
No, it is not. In fact, you can, well, the username is always required, because that, of course, determines what you have, what options you are presented for login. But you can, for substantial, which is the equivalent of MitID, you can choose to log in with just the smartphone app, no password required.
All right. Thank you very much. And the final question here is, what is included in the Signicat onboarding package?
Well, I'm very happy you asked me that question. Well, you get access to the proper infrastructure, of course. You get the MitID method, you get the MitID method when that becomes available. You get your own pre-production service where you can customize things to your liking. You also, if you choose a Signicat Enterprise, get your dedicated onboarding manager who will guide you through the process until you are ready to go live. You optionally you can order your own subdomain. That is an extra item, as well as adaptation of a graphical profile, and the onboarding manager will help you with that.
Excellent. All right. Do we have time, Dorte, for one final question, or what do you think?
We might
Yes,
share the result of the poll. One question was on what the result on the poll was, and it's 54% voted for A, solution A, and 46 voted for solution B, so a very close race.
Thank you for that.
Exactly.
Okay, I think we
Maybe
are.
then. Yeah.
Yes.
I think we are done for today, maybe.
All right. But then I would like to thank you very much to everybody who listened in today, and we will have a new webinar coming up in about a month's time. If you have any questions, please don't hesitate to get in touch with us here at Signicat. We are here to help you. Thank you very much, and have a nice day, everybody. Bye-bye.